Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I'm your Loremaster, and today, we finally do it. After doing almost every common ancestry except for my favorite, today we're finally fixing the problem and looking at the kooky world of gnomes. We are going to be chasing away the bleaching with this one, folks. So make sure to stay to the end to get your prescribed amount of entertainment. Gnomes are distant relatives of Fae. They are people coming from the first world millennia ago. In fact, there are still gnomes living in the wilds. Why the gnomes came to the material plane? Now that has been a subject of debate for centuries. Was it just an accident? Their curiosity pulling them to a random rift, only to find the consequences that they now face on Galorian? Or were they exiled, or on the run, a prank too far sending them away from their home forever? Regardless of which, the gnomes have long been natives to this world, and their first home long behind them. Gnomes are small, about the size of dwarves and halflings. Of course, there is an easy way to tell the two apart. Dwarves have the beards, halflings the feet, and gnomes have their eyebrows. It's stereotypical now that we have ethnicities, but it still helps. Gnome hair and skin take on a variety of colors, from the same as other Ansestries, to being all forms of metallic and chromatic. More on that later. Gnomes' muscles are laid out in a way that, while being the weakest of the common Ansestries, allow them to twist and bend in ways most other creatures cannot, which also allows them to take blows more cleanly than more other creatures. They have large, sensitive eyes, but unlike other creatures, they do not simply rely on one sense to explore the world, and will sniff and lick anything that catches their attention. As for the life cycle, a creature that tends to hate staying in one place an extended amount of time, they tend to have small families. Yes, marriage still happens, but both parties understand that it is not until death do us part. Gnomes tend to be big on contraception, but almost every year there are a few gnome births due to some seeing raising children as an adventure. The decision, of course, is usually the woman, since she is the one who will be carrying the child for 6 months to a year, because gnomes need to be random. Gnomes rarely tell their children what to do, but instead what to expect. Curiosity is key to a gnome's life, after all, and getting in trouble and making mistakes is an art form that needs to be mastered before adulthood. The curiosity of the young blossoms into a formal schooling of the older. Usually gnomes waiting to find an obsession instead of just enrolling in general schooling. Gnomes do not live forever, but living only second to the elves can give that impression. That said, their lives are limited by a phenomenon known as bleaching. The bleaching is a phenomenon that all gnomes need to deal with. When they reach adulthood, their colors start to go dull and shift to grays and whites. It is then that the days are numbered. From that point on, whenever a gnome suffers boredom, their colors begin to fade. They must continuously chase the next high, the next adventure, or the color will fade further and further. For most, this process ends up fatal. For many more, it is the risks taking trying to avoid the process that proves fatal. But there are few who do survive the process, becoming creatures known as bleachlings. It is actually a disturbing process when you look at it, doubly so since it uses the same mechanics as turning into a vampire or werewolf. Gnomes prefer clothes as brightly colored as them, and also prefer to have lots of pockets. Or a bandolier, that works too. They like things, and the more they have the ability to carry things, the happier they will be. As for armor and weapons, it is considered bad luck to use something you yourself have not worked on, and therefore they will at least apply paint to the object. and they enjoy tinkering too, to the point where they carry around small projects to stop themselves from actually messing with the actual combat equipment. Gnomes like things both complex and that have utility, meaning they will carry as many kinds of weapons as possible. Though all that said, the one problem gnomes have with the auto creation is that they, and their desires to always have new things, means that they rarely recreate the amazing inventions they produce. Which brings us to our first side tangent, the part of the show where we cobble things together and hope it all works out. Today we take a curated look at some of the complex weapons gnomes do make. First example, we have the relatively simple, like the flail pole, a staff with a flail at the end, and the flask thrower, objects designed to help alchemists reach their throws in their flasks further. That's tongue twister right there. Just as simple is the snare shield. Each shield specially designed to get a weapon stuck in it in order to disarm one's opponents. Then we have the battle ladder, a 4-foot ladder designed to hit people, just because. For technology, we have the switch scythe, which has its blades open and close, the piston maul, a hammer with extra oomph, and shrill staff, javelin, with thunderstones hid in the head to cause the thrown weapon to harm an area. And of course, there's the whipsaw glaive, which is a chainsaw on a stick. Though of all of these weapons, it is the hook hammer, an ancient tool which is both a hammer and a pick, which is used for both in mining but also for battle, which is considered the magnum opus of all of the weapons that gnomes have ever created. Gnome mines tend to be more, we will call it disorganized than other Ansestries. Even after millennia living on the material plane, they still act like an ancestry. To some, their curiosity and energy can be straining, and overall, many do find it charming as well. As for culture of the gnomes, well, that can be a bit difficult to pin down. Because of their chasing after that which interests them, gnomes typically can be found traveling in completely different directions from their peers. So boiling down a gnome narrowly into, well, anything can be difficult. The easiest way to describe them are children at heart, with all the good and bad which comes with it. Looking at ethnicities, there are a few we know of. First, the main four, which come not from location, but from affinity with the 4 different types of magic. As Fae, they are primarily connected to primal powers, or war. Now humanoids, that basin is still there, but they need to fill it in a different way, else they find themselves bleaching. The ones we think of when we think of gnomes are the Fae children, and are either born in places with abundant primal power, or away from any tradition. Their appearances are the colorful ones we are familiar with, but with the drawback of being the most unstable source of energy, meaning these are the ones who most have the need to chase adventure to offset the curse. Keen sparks, on the other hand, are found in places where arcane is key. They take on more normal skin tones and hair colors, and are those most likely to devote themselves to studying at universities and research labs. Glimmer gnomes, full name glamour gnomes, are those in places blessed by the divine. They take on more metallic hues, and are even greater with illusion magic than gnomes typically are. Finally, my favorite, Fell Gnomes hide in the shadow of the occult. They wear darker colors, but are not evil. Not that they would not enjoy scaring you a bit, but it's all fun and games. As for more unusual ethnicities of gnomes, first we have the bleachlings, the gnomes who manage to survive the bleaching. They are calm and subtle beings, almost devoid of emotions, which explains why gnomes treat them like we humans treat undead. Then we have the gnomes who were scared of death, and therefore tried to personally reconnect themselves to the first world. They became mad creatures known as brigands. Finally, we have those from the Darklands, the ones who, through their exploration, discovered evil fae coming through in portals deep underground. Dedicating their people to stopping these threats, over the centuries the group known as Smurf Neblins have been secretly protecting the surface, keeping some of the darkest monsters below ground, but also refusing to let anyone who finds the hidden villages leave. But there's also one more, which was retconned likely, but still going to be enough for a side tangent. So Beloko and Eleko. First, the main connecting thread. First edition mentions that Eleko are a subtype of Spriggans, though the lack of mention in second edition likely means this was abandoned. So, Beloko are the ultimate hunters of the Marauding Expanse. The combination of stealth, traps, and minor illusions, which not unlike the gnomes, giving them an advantage in jungle environments. They especially love eating the flesh of intelligent creatures, but that of spellcasters is even more prized. After all, consuming enough and Beloko turn into Eloko, creatures with much more potent magic powers. Now for regions where gnomes call home. They do not have one place to themselves, instead of living in scattered villages across the continents. Let's do a quick overview, starting with Western Avestan. In Karlsgrad, in the land of the Gnome Kings, the gnomes who live in the district of Iceberry have navigated the rivers for centuries, and are more than happy to take others for a ride. Further south, in what would now be around New Thessalonia, is Erere, home of the Shea Citadels where gnome monks meditate against the bleaching. Bristol Downs in Vassalion, halfway between Korvosa and Magnemar, makes it both a safe stop on the land route between the two cities, but it's also known as the home of the finest instruments in Avestan. Classical work is in Cheliax, and is known for production of spell components and the short leash that the crown allows them to be on. Finally, in Isgar, we have Umak, a village which was caught in the center of the recent Goblin Blood Wars, and they have taken measures overboard to ensure that they never are caught unaware again. In the east, Omessa was built while the elves were away from Conan, and is a work of art in rope form. Rispel is deep within the Vudronian forest, and not only has deals with the Fae to lumber rights, but also has a spot on the Telden Royal Council, a position which they turn over to a new representative in a few years when the current holder grows bored. We also have two within the River Kingdom. Drovox, known for its vast production of cheap weaponry, and Trom, a city of exiles made up of various political factions, with most gnomes belonging to more than one. Then we have a few settlements on Garund. The most famous is the Final Plain, a city in Katapesh, known for having a transient population to the point where half the buildings stand empty at any given time. Also in Katapesh is Javifo, which is an underground gnome settlement known for its wealth and caution, and Tibbins Reed, a rich trading city halfway between Katapesh and Krontium. Speaking of Crontium, as a city known for being both a center of learning and connected everywhere, the city has a sizable gnome population, said to be larger than any other in the Inner Sea region. Finally, let's look at two places which are not in the Inner Sea region. First, the Rough Woods in Ibaria, a location guarded by mysterious lycanthrope rangers. And then we have God Poda, which is debris floating in the Arcadian Ocean, located off the coast of Aveston, where gnomes have built a floating city. It's always interesting to see what gnomes end up doing when they're given free range. But again, there are still gnomes in the first world. However, since they are technically different from all gnomes, let's take a side tangent to go through these two first world sites. First, the city of Zolumashi is an idyllic little gnome village. But just below the surface, the area is the center of a hidden war between house sprites and gremlins. And then there is the Moon Ladder, an ambitious structure whose goal was to connect all the way to the first world's moon. However, construction was halted, and the majority of the structure made off limits for no known reason. Now, we reach the point where we talk about things about gnomes I find interesting, which actually is everything, but these get special mention. First, gnome governments. Gnomes choose their rulers by means different from other creatures. Not strength or bloodlines, but things like greatest craftsmen, or greatest pranksters, or what is known as a spousal system, where they determine the best person to rule, and then elect their spouse or siblings to the position, with the best choice charged of keeping them in check. Second, we have language. Even after all this time, language is generally a new concept to gnomes, and most talk more to hear their own voice than to say anything useful. Primarily, gnomes project information through their body language, their eyes and faces emotive, and them wearing their emotions on their sleeves. If a gnome does not like you, you will know long before they tell you. Some Ansestries might not appreciate creatures who wear their emotions so openly, but it is how the gnomes live, and it is beautiful in its own way. And finally, speaking of beautiful things, the greatest art form for the gnomes: pranks. Again, the gnomes are a species on borrowed time, who borrow more through the power of enjoyment. Pranks are a quick and dirty way to get enjoyment, but to do pranks quick and dirty, no. Gnomes take the art of pranks with the utmost seriousness, or as serious as pranks can be, and pride themselves on doing all kinds of wacky things to make a situation the most enjoyable. That said, friends tend not to be safe from these, and it is always good to follow the old words of wisdom. When a gnome laughs, duck. And one last point of interest, and final side tangent for the day: a unique gnomish faction, the Wonder Seekers. While all gnomes fight against the bleaching in one way or another, the Wonder Seekers are a group whose purpose is to reverse the bleaching in every gnome on Golarion. A tall order, and one which has had too many failures. But they also have their fair share of success stories. Founded by Paishe Wonderseeker, they have headquarters in Corinth, Almas, Kathir, and Magnamar, though the members usually travel too much to use the headquarters for anything besides a bed and a meal. Now, on to my favorite part of my episodes, the religion. Gnome worship tends to be slightly different from the typical worship. Gnomes preferring both fun and zealotry. Desna's open road is always tempting, and Kaden Kaelin's worship among the gnomes leans more towards the adventure side than any other part of his portfolio. Those who choose to follow Shaylin are typically artists and the like, and those of smithing follow Tureg, and Sylvana, a deity of illusions to natural illusionists, a deity of secrets to those who favor curiosity. No better match, though they insist on calling her the fourth veil instead of the seventh, for some reason long forgotten. Aristotle's faith is rare, but those who live among animals instead of people love it. And a surprising few gnomes worship Gazra and the Green Faith. To most gnomes, they prefer to worship Frigg as the perfect construct than as a god, as the former is, if we're being honest, much more impressive. Likewise, while some worship the two-facedness of Nethys, he strikes them more as a lesson of pursuing too much power. And finally, their own gnome deity is Nevi Rumbledazzle, though her faith is stronger with the Smurfneblins and surface gnomes. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Gnomes are great. I love gnomes. But now, with our anniversary month coming to an end, next we will work on another list of topics we are working towards. Part of a specific group we will be talking about coming up relatively soon. See you then.